You're tuning into the Active Mom Podcast with physical therapist, Dr. Carrie Pagliano, a real mom's guide to all things postpartum return to workouts after baby. If you're a postpartum mom, coach, trainer, or physical therapist looking for answers on how to get back to running, CrossFit, yoga, Pilates, HIIT, you name it, without the fear of pelvic floor issues or doing something wrong, this is the podcast for you. Let's start the show. All right, so one of the things that we've been talking about a lot lately, it's been coming up with a lot of guests, is the idea of postpartum community. And our guest today, Dr. Kristal Lau, she is a physician and postpartum wellness consultant. And she's also the author of the book, Postpartum 30, 30 Days to a Nurtured Fourth Trimester, a balance of traditional Chinese and modern postpartum care. And I was so excited when Kristal reached out because I was like, I've seen this living in the DC area. We have a lot of clients from everywhere in the world. And I was like, we need to talk about this. So Dr. Kristal, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for this invite, Carrie. I'm really excited to be here.
So you are in Germany right now.
Yes.
But by way of, you said Malaysia and Australia. Unpack that quickly.
So born and bred Malaysian. I left home to complete med school in Australia at about 21 years old. Graduated in Australia and then worked there for about 6 years. Met my husband and then moved with him to the States. And then from there, we moved again to Germany. And next up, we don't know yet what's happening.
That sounds about right. We were just talking before we hit record about that's very common where I live. Is a lot of my kids' friends, dad's getting ready to retire. We don't know where we're going to end up. And so that community continues to change and evolve, especially as a military family. So for you, like, you know, you've almost got like two aspects of this. You have like your cultural aspect and then also like the military constant changing sort of aspect. For you growing up in Malaysia, what was your experience kind of watching pregnant women give birth, and what is that kind of traditional experience?
Yeah, so growing up, the word that comes to mind is the word confinement. And I've realized ever since being away from Malaysia and the Asian side that when I bring up to friends who are pregnant or, having more kids, and I ask them, oh, so do you guys do some kind of confinement? They give me a question mark, especially if they've grown up in the West or they are of, Western heritage. They're like, confinement, that sounds like jail.
Right.
And I'm like, and I do tell them, I said, the running joke back home is people do ask, so you're going to be in mommy jail after you have your baby, but the most luxurious type you can think of, because so confinement is Malaysian Chinese. We're like second up to fourth generation from South China when, the Brits were there and they brought in the South Chinese to work in the tin mines. So that's where a lot of our ancestors come from. And the concept of 坐月子 or sitting the month, loosely translated, that's that postpartum recovery practice. That's where in China, they definitely do it. And there are variations of it in the other Eastern Asian cultures, like the Koreans and the Japanese, and even the Indonesians as well. And the Malays, they call it pantang. Pantang is like taboo. And for them, it's a duration of 40 days. The Chinese, Malaysian Chinese, depending on your family, my family does 30 days just because it makes sense with the calendar month. That's where I like about it, because it makes sense with the modern times.
Right.
So you still, you still perform your confinement practice and all that. The crux of it is just rest and recovery for 30 days. So once you come home, ideally, it starts immediately after you've given birth. But nowadays, with us going to hospitals and things, we start it once we get home. And all you do is you're supposed to just rest, nurse your baby or feed your baby, care for your baby, and that's it. Usually, traditionally, the maternal elder will come in to look after the new mother and her baby. So that could be a mother-in-law, or if you don't have those, maybe an aunt or an older sister or a cousin sister. They'll come in, they'll cook all your meals for you, soups, teas. And the first time I did it, I was in Alabama. My mom came to stay with us, and she was there for the first 30 days. And gosh, Carrie, I was just sitting. She's like, Crystal, so are you ready for lunch yet? I'm like, sure. And she'll
Oh
go
my
cook.
gosh.
And she's like, okay, you need to drink this. You need to drink this soup. You need to drink this tea. And she'll just give them to me.
Oh my
But at,
gosh.
but at the same time, because she was there cooking, I mean, she cooked for everybody.
Right.
And
That
then,
sounds amazing.
yeah, and not only that, so the nutrition part is huge because we know how important that is
Right.
postpartum. I mean, you literally just brought life to earth. You are recovering from so much
Yeah.
that's going on. You need every single building block inside to nourish you back to whatever semblance of energy you need for the
Yeah.
next phase of motherhood. So on top of nutrition, what my mom or most of the people who help the moms during confinement, they'll do your laundry, they'll clean your house, they'll do everything else at home. So you literally rest and recover. That's all you do for
I've got the
30
wrong
days.
heritage. I'm just gonna start with that one right now. Like yeah.
And the thing that I notice a difference being in the West as opposed to in Asia is the massage part of this practice. And so in the West, I notice any physical therapist or masseuse who can do postpartum or prenatal massage, they're very cautious. Even when I say,
I
"Hey, I'm
know.
fine," they're like, "No, no, let's wait till you're 6 weeks. After
I
your OB
know.
clears you." So I'm like, okay, I won't force you because
Mhm.
you've got your licensing or insurance, whatever stuff you need to follow. But back in Asia, you start massage immediately.
Oh my gosh.
So they're massage, gentle around the belly, but your arms and your legs, because you still have so much swelling in that immediate
So
postpartum.
much.
Yeah, so that's where the massage comes in,
Oh
and
my
that's
gosh.
super
That sounds
common.
amazing. Well, that's the thing that I'm just as you're talking, I'm thinking, I don't know that I've ever heard of a massage therapist offering specifically postpartum massage. You see prenatal out the wazoo, you see that
Hmm.
everywhere, but not postpartum. And for us, at least in the last several years in the States, probably since even before 2018, there's been a growing trend of earlier access, and part of that is ACOG is like, hey, we need to get earlier access
Hmm.
to moms, and of course now we know even more that moms are at risk in that fourth trimester. But no,
Yeah.
I don't know a single massage therapist that's like, yes, I do postpartum massage. I'll come to your house. I'll make you feel good. That's a great business idea right there because I know a ton of
It
women that would pay for it.
it is. And what's interesting is I think there's just a lot of worry in the West about like, oh, because and the
I
thing is, I think because there's not enough knowledge out there in every way,
Right.
the scientific community, academia,
Yeah.
clinical, and even just the rest of the other health professionals like you guys, physical therapists, everyone, there's just not enough
Of
knowledge
course not.
there to
Right.
be like, hey, let's just go and do this, it'll be okay,
Right.
or okay, let's hold back ours,
Well,
which is
even
which is interesting and sad at the same time.
even though with prenatal, and I remember with my first pregnancy, I was, of course, you're going to tell like everybody on the street that you're pregnant. The second the people find out you're pregnant, they don't want to touch you because they think if they touch some certain spot on your body, it's going to spontaneously burst you into labor. I got news for you. Like both my kids basically had to be pried out of my body. We tried all the spots and all the things. If they're not coming, those spots don't matter. But
Yeah,
people think like orthopedic therapists, it's the funniest thing. They're like, "Oh,
yeah.
I can't do this. You might go into labor." I'm like, "Trust me, I'm not going to."
You see, I like that you say the word trust me. And that's the thing that we don't empower women and mothers enough is when you're
Yes.
pregnant, you really
Yes.
know like all the feel, especially once you have more children, because
Yep.
you've gone through the first time, you kind of know this feeling means
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And to be honest, even in the medical field, and now that I'm, out of clinical practice, but looking back through my whole med school,
Mhm.
teaching, and then my intern year, and then my like junior doctor training time,
Yep.
unfortunately the bias is there
Of course.
that women, and even women doctors, because of the training we go through and the curriculum we have, the syllabus we have, I would say I had that viewpoint too.
Mhm.
I am kind of sad that I guess bought into it, but then again, to be kind to myself, I'm like, well, that's all I knew. I
Right.
went to this training to learn.
Right.
hoping that they would give me the balance of both sides. Because I have, and the thing that you said about people not wanting to touch a pregnant woman, that was me. So when I did my
Yeah.
emergency term, I avoided pregnant women like the plague because I was so afraid that I would mess something up. And I was
Right.
like, I cannot handle two lives in one. Like,
Right. Well,
no.
especially first trimester too, because again, no one's going to do the study that says if you do this, it will harm your baby. First of all, let's just be
Hmm.
clear about that. But
Yeah.
again, and I think it's also hard, especially with first time moms, because you're questioning everything. I mean, you've lived in the States, like we get freaked out about deli meat, all crazy things. And I have a friend I went to PT school with, she's Greek, and she's like, "You cannot tell a Greek woman she cannot have feta." I'm like, "Valid." Like, totally valid.
I see her point.
So, but we just I think there's all these kind of things get perpetuated out of fear. I mean, when I was 9 weeks pregnant with my oldest, we went to Costa Rica,
Mm.
and I did waterfall rappelling, and we did zip lining. But I wouldn't eat the unpasteurized cheese from the farm from the cow that was, like, right there. And the guy
Hmm.
who was doing our boat, he's like, "Wait a second. You did these other things, but you won't do that?" I'm like, Americans, like, what else are you gonna say?"
It's that's where I think, I mean, I'm hoping just with, more moms, I would say,
Yeah.
getting into science. I mean, let me rephrase that. There are already moms and women doing a lot of science, but I think
Yes.
getting just going out and challenging status
Yes.
quo or whatever
Yes. Yeah.
stereotype or biases are out there right now. I think that'll be really interesting because like right now there was a paper last year that is actually reframing motherhood or matrescence as a neurodevelopmental stage
Mm.
that has greater impacts on a female or a woman who has a child.
Mhm.
Like they're proposing that it's bigger than puberty. Like the effects on us is bigger than puberty. And
I don't think they're wrong.
I know, reading that paper, I can't remember the last time I got so excited about a scientific article, but
Right?
I read that, I was like, yes, this is me,
Yeah.
this is me. And I was
Yep.
like, wow, finally someone is saying it and I guess
Yeah.
validating all these things.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. So for you living in Alabama, which is an
Mhm.
experience in and of itself, it like different from other places in the United States. I've never lived there, but it's the South. How do you like did it seem hard to be able to have kind of this traditional experience where you were living? And I'm assuming you were on a military base.
Yeah.
What was that like? And then what was kind of the reaction of some of the other mothers around you that maybe were from the States and, were trained, walk out of the hospital in your pre-pregnancy jeans, you better be walking, you better be like, doing all these things. Like, what was that experience for you?
Yeah, so firstly, when we were planning on how to do the confinement month,
Hmm.
um, there were no, I mean, there was some Asian grocers around because of the military base where we're at. There was a smaller town. There was actually a pretty huge Korean community
Oh,
because of
good.
the influx of
Right.
military families.
Yep.
There was even a Korean mayor in that town, which was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
but when I went there, very basic, and they didn't really even have the basic herbs that I, normally would take, or that my mom has advised me, like, when you're in the confinement, you should at least have these herbs like red dates or certain roots and stuff.
Hmm.
So we actually made a trip. So happened I had to renew my passport. So we had to go to New York to the Malaysian consulate or embassy. So
Hmm.
I took that chance. I was 8 months pregnant. We went
Oh,
there.
geez. That's a trip. New York in general is hard, but like New York and 8 months pregnant is
Yes.
really hard.
It was, I don't think I'll do that again.
Okay, fair.
But when we went there, we did go to see a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, a doctor.
Mm,
And then he did the thing. I really liked that he asked, do you plan to breastfeed? Because then he would prescribe herbs that will either stimulate
yep.
or, reduce your lactation. So I said yes. And then he said, okay, you're fine. And don't first, and your OB said they don't foresee any complications. So this is what I prescribe. And they have a herbal, I guess, dispensary downstairs. So I just packed up 30 days worth of herbs,
Nice.
brought it back, stuck it in my freezer, and Yeah. So that's
Okay.
one way of doing it. But the good thing now is a lot of these herbal dispensaries or traditional Chinese medicine clinics, they actually offer tele teleconferencing or phone consults. Again, and this is where I really feel like the traditional Chinese medicine community are ahead of the Western medical side because they understand their limitations and they work with modern
Yes.
health practitioners.
Yep.
Even in Malaysia, all the TCM doctors I've seen, they will always say, bring your latest medical report from your regular
Right.
doctor. Because
Right.
I want to, and they know how to read the stuff. They
Yeah.
understand what those things mean. And they'll go like, okay, if you have this issue, maybe get that sorted out first, and then
Hmm.
we'll add on TCM treatments and remedies
Right.
once you're cleared.
So it's
Or if
very
they
collaborative.
Yes,
Yeah.
very. Even for me, at before I had my first kid, I thought because I've always had like irregular menses, and I thought, oh, maybe that could affect fertility because I
Hmm.
didn't know very much, and honestly, I wasn't that interested in my own physiology in med school. So I went to see a TCM doctor because my mom said, why not try?
Hmm.
Okay, First thing she said was, okay, just go get a latest update from like
Yeah.
at least a family doctor, and she even wrote a form for me to get a ultrasound of my ovaries and everything just to make sure there's no cysts
Yeah.
and all that. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And she's
You
like,
cover
okay,
all
when
the
you do
bases.
that, she's like, all right, come back, and then she applies all her TCM stuff and then
Uh-huh.
would advise me, okay, do this, do that, or eat this, eat that, and that should strengthen your fertility kind of thing.
Gotcha.
So that was interesting, and I really love that because, and I think that's what is really missing from our Western
Is that
medical
collaboration?
training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Hmm.
conversation has come up a lot. In the context of both pregnancy and postpartum. And I do think in our space, PTs, we tend to be collaborative anyway, especially
Yes.
in pelvic health. We work with dietitians, we work with, psychologists and coaches and trainers and physicians of all sorts and that sort of thing. That's a little bit of our nature, but it really is this hodgepodge of, hey, these are people that I've been connected with over the years that I know do a nice job. It's not anything that's ready made, and you have to find us that have the networks already built. And I think that's the part that has been lost to a degree, is that those communities within the medical profession, at some point, ideally they were inherent, it was like organic, and now it's like you really have to go out and seek that out. And if you don't know that that exists, it's like this whole other world that sometimes you don't realize until after the fact, which I don't think that that's super fair either. what
Yeah.
what do the TCM providers like? Is there an opinion as far as like early activity, walking, exercise, that sort of thing? What's the mindset as far as that goes?
Yeah. So traditionally, for this confinement period, they ask moms to bed rest, but now we know bed rest is just not great for your muscles at all.
Right.
So for my book, I did reach out to a TCM practitioner in LA. And we actually sat for a couple of hours to really chat about that, and then followed up. She actually reviewed my chapters on the TCM stuff,
Hmm.
and the modern recommendations that I make, because I wanted to make sure we kind of straddle both sides and are
Yep.
fair, and people can choose which you can do traditional or modern when you read my book. So she actually said right now the TCM side, because she's also my generation
Right.
and her grandfather was also a TCM doctor, but she says we're going towards light activity. She's like,
Hmm.
don't bed rest anymore because the science says it's just really not good.
Right.
So I mean, yes, traditionally that's what they recommend, but that's what those doctors and physicians knew back then.
Right.
But now that we know better,
We're shifting a little
let's
bit.
let's adapt.
Okay. That's good
Yes.
to hear. I was telling you a little bit earlier. I had a client a number of years ago. I was fortunate enough to be able to work with her after her first, through her second pregnancy and afterwards. And her first pregnancy, parents were here. I can't remember what her background was, but it was very strict traditional bed rest. And when she came to me, I think she was probably somewhere between 8 to 12 weeks, and we didn't have a lot of time before she was supposed to go back to work. And just the atrophy alone, and she had
Wow.
other pelvic floor issues and leakage and things like that. And then her parents were leaving. And so it was I was trying to wrap my head around, we're trying to honor this culturally, but it really set her up physically in a not
Mhm.
so great way to dive right into Western culture, back to work, drop off, pick up, daycare, all that kind of stuff. Um, Through her second, and her second was during COVID, so it was good news, bad
Mhm.
news, right?
Yep.
She was like, you know what, that strict did not work out, and I think with a toddler too. And so I'd be curious too, like, depending on how many kids you have, like what, maybe going to the center's vacation, I don't know. But
You
she very much consciously was like, okay, we're not going to do that. I cannot do that. I don't think her parents could come because of COVID and travel restrictions and that sort of thing. So the circumstances, but her choice also said, hey, that's not going to work for me. That was not something that was a great experience for her. So in kind of what you've seen, like, is it different the more kids you have? Is the purpose different? Like, what's that role of that rest period? What does that look like?
So the purpose remains the same.
Mhm.
Still rest and recover, focus on giving mom the space for those full 30 days. So the idea again, and this helps if you really have that tribe or community around you, is
Right.
someone looks after that toddler. New mom does nothing again. So this worked out for us here in Germany. So I had my second 2019. No, 2021. And so that was when Germany still had the hard lockdown,
Right.
hospitals were like, and travel was still restricted. And it was nice to have my mom the first time. And the stress that we got was mostly just, generational differences. She wasn't as strict. My mom wasn't as strict. Plus, I can kind of sometimes throw back things at her. I'm like, well, you asked me to study medicine. So this is the knowledge. Don't force me to do that.
You're like, you did
So
this, not me. You did this.
but my husband, he's Caucasian American. So he's been away from home since after high school in the military. So he's
Right.
not used to living at home with a parent figure for a
Which
long
is
time.
hard, period. Let's just put that one out there for what
Hard.
it is. Yes.
Yeah. So to us that was the stress that we got from her being there, but otherwise, she cooked like food, helping us care with the baby was amazing. So the second time around we thought, let's just do the 30 days ourselves. And
Mhm.
my husband, one thing as well, the first time he felt so excluded.
Ah,
And that is also a very traditional thing
okay.
because, and I think this permeates any culture, Western or Asian, is the male figure, the husband, the father, or I guess the non birthing partner, is usually excluded from the childcare,
Mhm.
the baby stuff, or even caring for the mom because people just assume they don't know anything. You can't
Right.
do this and you're not useful. So please step aside.
Right.
So frustrating. So my husband was just mad because to him, he couldn't do anything when I was pregnant, and I had the worst pelvic pains and
Oh,
all that stuff.
no.
Yeah. And then the birth, he can't do anything either, but
Right.
just be there. So he felt like the only place that he can really, I guess, be what he wanted to be for me throughout this process was the postpartum.
Mhm.
And then the first time he felt he was not given that chance, it was taken away from him
Yeah.
because of the traditional cultural nature of this practice.
Right.
So the second time I said, "You're gonna be my confinement nanny." That's what we call
Nice.
that's what we call them in Asia, confinement nannies. So
Mhm.
in Malaysia and a lot of parts in Asia, there are agencies that allow families to hire confinement nannies. So you have this motherly figure, woman who comes and stays with you for 28 to 30 days. They do so they
Wow.
do all this stuff, and it's helpful for those who live away from their parents or they
Yep.
want to do this with someone who's not a parent because then you kind of remove that,
Yes. I
and you
think
can
that's really smart.
yeah, and you can set your boundaries and they'll follow through with,
Yep.
the boundaries that you set. Or if you really have the money, they have confinement centers. Sounds jailish, but um,
I had a client the other day. She's from China, and she was telling
mm,
me all about these because I told her that you and I were gonna talk, and she was telling me all about it in China. I was like, "Really? This is a thing? I need to go."
I mean, one thing I think they would actually benefit is having some folks come from your background because of the
Yeah.
whole bed rest thing. If someone comes in to educate them, like, hey, it's important to, like, not do bed rest, or even just do the simplest exercise. I mean, not even
Right.
exercise, just what's good bodily motion to
Yep.
maintain your muscle during that time.
Yeah.
I think that's what those areas are lacking, because from what I understand from those centers, it's really luxurious, Carrie. Like, I mean, you pay tens and thousands for the 30 days, but you have a chef that cooks you all this
Oh my
Chinese
gosh.
food.
Yeah.
You have a masseuse that comes in.
Oh my
They give you
gosh.
a family suite,
Oh my gosh.
and they're like the herbal baths, provided you don't have stitches and stuff that you can't
Right.
soak. And and if you need rest and baby's crying, there'll be someone to come help you at least for a while with the baby
Mhm.
and take him away to a nursery. The only caveat is, because they all operate, again, it's not registered, it's not licensed, it's a center, it's not
Right.
clinical, so they don't really need to follow any guidelines, really, because it's like, hey, come check into this luxurious hotel
Right.
experience. So when it comes to breastfeeding, lactation, or certain other more, I guess, health related things, they may not provide something
I
that's
see.
consistent with right now,
Mhm.
because they don't have to. They just
Gotcha.
provide you the best experience. So I think if there's a collaboration there, you
We
know,
we could do this better, right?
absolutely, absolutely. So I know in the US, these type of places, they call them postpartum wellness stays, I think. And it sounds better than confinement center,
Right.
honestly.
Well, and I was thinking as you were talking, a couple of things. One is, I mean, thinking back on just even my first getting out of the house and going for a block down the street. I had an unplanned C-section after a 3-day induction, and just like at that point, you're swollen. You just like, can I even move? Can I even get out of the house? Like that was my saving grace, was just getting out of the house and starting to move. But the other thing that occurred to me as you were talking is, what is the transition out of that period look like? Because again, for my client here, it was a very rude awakening to go from doing nothing to all of a sudden she's supposed to be back to work and doing everything again. Is the transition a little less abrupt?
Um, for me, no. It because it it actually, it can seem abrupt, and it's kind of up to you to plan your transition. But
Uh,
so normally what they do is this, the strictness comes from following the rules, like you can't drink cold water, you can't eat cold stuff. So
mhm.
it's very heavily nutrition based, and once you're done, then you kind of just start eating, whatever you would like, and see how you go. And then the other practices is like, don't wash your hair for 30 days. No, not for me. I lasted 2 weeks and that was it. The compromise I did with my mom was, I'll make sure I blow dry my hair really nicely in the bathroom before I step out.
Okay.
Okay. And that works. The TCM, doctor that I was touched with, she's like, okay, we can compromise on that part.
Oh my goodness, that's
And
funny.
and some women, I know, even in Malaysia, they just don't even follow that. They're like, no, this is ridiculous. I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
And the very strict one tells you no baths and showers also for 30 days.
No,
So,
no, no, that
like,
shower was like, I'm going to live, I'm going to survive this. If I got a shower in a day, I knew I was gonna make it.
yeah. So for us, a lot of that transition out is just transition out of those practices, which means you
Gotcha.
just go
Okay.
back to your normal. But in terms of your modern day to day, that actually doesn't really, we don't really talk about that very much, because,
No.
and I think a big part of that is because we're so used to living so close to family or
Mhm.
multi-generational household, that even when you do transition, help is still
Is still
there.
there. Yeah,
It's
and
still available.
that's a
Mhm.
great point because, again, so many, at least here in the States, people have traveled so far away. I mean, my parents were on the West Coast. They had to fly and come and stay for a week. Granted, my in-laws we're lucky enough that they're close by here, but not everybody has that. And to your point too, sometimes you need help and it probably shouldn't be your family because you want them to be your support, not, I mean, like I love my in-laws, I do. Um, I remember our first nanny experience was going to be my mother-in-law coming 30 minutes across the
Mhm.
beltway to help us, and that lasted about a hot second. One, because it's just a hard drive, and then two, I can't have my mother-in-law as my employee. Like No, those two things need to be separate. I
Yeah.
need to tell you what I need and what I want as a mother, and not worry about what your mother-in-law thinks.
No, you're absolutely right. It really, the emotional part is just so strong when
Yes. And
family
you're
is
such a
involved.
mess there too anyway, like hormonally, and trying to
Yeah.
figure that stuff out for the first time, you know?
This is a great tie-in to parental leave. That to me is where, and so like in Australia, 6 months maternity leave.
Yeah.
So you have your fourth trimester, and then you still have another 3 months to kind of, and
Yep.
a lot of, and at least in the department I worked with, oh my God, they were amazing, Carrie. It makes me feel like if this entrepreneurship thing for me kind of fizzles out, I have the best backup job and the best like ex boss to go back to.
Yeah.
And I love everyone there, like because so I used to work at geriatrics,
Mhm.
and I still, I'm very close to my ex-boss and the physiotherapist there, actually.
Mhm.
So I still email them,
We're
text
fun
them,
people.
it's great.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a senior colleague who had a baby, and they said, sure, go do your thing. 6 months, your job's still here, nothing's gonna change. And they said, if you get, you want to start coming back slowly, we can talk about doing part-time or a few
Mm.
hours, like maybe do clinics first. And
Yep.
so accommodating, and that's the culture there. And I know in Germany, definitely the first 8 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, it's like enshrined in their law. There's like a maternity protection
Yes.
law that if any employer tries in any way to get a new mom to work in that first 8 weeks, they
Mhm.
can be like jailed for a criminal
Oh my
offense.
goodness. Wow.
Yeah, it's like a
That's
document. You
no
can
joke.
Google that. It's serious. And a lady I spoke to here, she said when she had her two children, she took up to 3 years to go back to full time work. So
Mm,
she kind of eased into it, did part
yeah,
time and eased into it. And they cannot take her job away.
that's nice. And that's the thing that I think there's such a broad expanse, just a big dichotomy here in the States, because if you are, working at a job where you don't have maternity leave, you're expected to be back within that 6 weeks. You're not getting paid during that time. Childcare expenses here are insane. So that's like one end of the spectrum. And then the other end of the spectrum, if you're lucky enough to do it, like, I mean, I was working full time up until I had my oldest, then shifted to clinic care 2 days a week, and then was home with him 3 days,
Hmm.
kept that through till I had my daughter. And then when they went off to school, now obviously when I work for myself, I kind of do whatever. But having that balance of um, being able to do parts and pieces, but at the same time still be integral. Like basically, you're not working just to pay for your childcare for your kids. That's the part that,
Hmm.
and a lot of people, they're forced to do that,
Yep.
and and fast. And then I think at that point, if you're going back to work at 6 weeks, you never really get a chance to kind of fully do that recovery. And I think that's one of the downfalls here in the States. And again, too, now that we've got more information about, um, that beginning of the first or the fourth trimester being really dangerous, especially for a lot of Black and brown women, like that sort of thing. It's
Hmm.
just, what are we doing over here? Like, I really, you've got like that one end, and on the other hand end is like a lot of the women that I work with that are like trying to overtrain and undernourish and breastfeed their baby and do all the
Oh,
things
wow.
and end up with like bone stress fractures because essentially they're like overdoing, underfueling, and trying to do all this stuff. I'm like, how can we like what happened? Like, how can
Yeah,
we
what
have these
happened
two
is
things that
right.
neither of them are good situations? How can we find a situation in which moms feel supported? We can still be active, but in a very supportive way that takes into account work and sleep and nutrition and, mental health, for crying out loud. Like, where do we go wrong
Hmm.
in all this? Now I'm expecting you to find the solution to all of it.
No, I think it's, I mean, this book has really started me on a journey I did not expect to
Mm,
take. Like postpartum, like maternal health was really, because I ended up doing a master's of public health when I was in Alabama, because
mhm,
it's been an interest of mine, but I kind of gravitated towards healthcare organization and policy, because in my
mm.
geriatric work, I realized even as a health professional, if you really, really want to try and make any change, even if you become the top specialist, professor, doctor, whatever,
Yeah,
if you're not up there in the policy
policy.
level,
Yep, exactly, exactly.
nothing is gonna change, or it's gonna
Yeah,
take someone else to, bring your dreams to
right,
fruition.
right.
So I kinda studied that, and then maternal health, I was like, "Yeah, dip a little bit because public health always covers maternal and child health."
Always, yep.
So I did that, but then actually becoming a mom and then going through the motions and seeing all these things, I'm like,
It's next level.
"This," exactly like you
Yes.
said, "What's going on here?"
Yeah, and
We're
I
in
mean,
the we're in the 2020s,
I
like,
know,
what's
and that's
going
the
on
part
here?
that just there's still things that are just so antiquated. I mean, there are I forget the bill name that's in the House right now trying to go through to get basically early postpartum care covered
I
under,
think I
I
know
think,
which one you're talking about.
Medicaid
I've
and
been
Medicare.
following.
It
Yeah.
was it was 8181 last year, and then it didn't go through, and it's 2 something now, I can't remember, because they make it so easy to follow this stuff with how a bill becomes
Of
law.
course.
So, but I mean, like, I feel like there's efforts there, but again, I mean, what was it last week? Oh, bless, I can't remember her name. The Olympic sprinter that died in childbirth at home and wasn't found for 3 weeks. Like, again, like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and out of that relay team, 3 out of the 4 of them had some sort of life-threatening birth experience. I'm like, how, how can we have these conversations? Again, it comes back to advocacy and policies and those sorts of things, and having just some appreciation for the fact that this is a major medical event, and we're literally not providing our moms with clear guidance and support from a straight medical perspective, and not to mention, cultural and that sort of thing, acknowledgement there
Oh,
too.
absolutely. And it really, for me personally, I feel like a lot of things I'm seeing, it's also linked to the messages that I grew up with about what motherhood
Mm,
means to a woman.
yeah.
And I mean, I had really bad postpartum depression with my first
Hmm.
kid because, man, Carrie, I was so bitter, resentful, and I really allowed all that messages of like, oh, once you're a mom, that's it. Your life's over. Your dream's over. Everything you want to be, like
Yeah.
you should have done all that before you had a kid. Like you should have
Right.
listened to all those messages just sunk in. Hormones don't help.
No, but
So
you're sitting here as a physician, like, you're like, I'm an incredibly intelligent, accomplished person, but also now that I've done this, like, it's that identity struggle that I think it really
it's
just messes with
yeah,
people.
and then
Yeah.
because, I had left Australia and everyone was
Yep.
like, "Oh, you had such a promising career,"
Right.
and then the whole, "You're just a housewife," if, my
Well,
little quota airs, and as if that's, and, oh, the nice thing is my husband some months ago, he sent me one of those reels that, I think someone somewhere did a study that, what a stay-at-home mom with young kids, your net value is like, what, about at least
I know.
180 to 200 grand per year.
When am I gonna
If
see that?
right?
I would like that along with my maternal massage there.
Yeah. And it's, to me, it's interesting because, like, if society in general and all the messages that,
Yeah.
we feed to young girls, that motherhood is like, so, like, the value is zero.
Yes.
It's better to pay someone else to raise your kids. Like, they have more value than if you choose to stay home with your kids and
Right.
raise them. Like, I
Right.
even grew up with the message of don't become like your aunt. And I'm like, why? She's happy looking after her 4 kids. They're like, well, she got a degree and never used it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
happy. And my gosh, and looking back now, I'm like, I hats off to my aunt because she put up with all that crap and
Yeah.
still persevered with a smile on her face, showing up for
Yep.
her kids and just enjoying motherhood.
Yeah.
And, I like, so going through therapy and all that stuff. And even up till today, I still actively remind myself, I really want to enjoy motherhood so that my girls, specifically also because they're girls, they see me enjoy
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
My mom was trailblazer, and I
Yeah.
really admire what she's done, but at the same time, I could see the stress, and there were
Mhm.
moments where I felt like, you know, maybe she had a feeling like, oh, if I didn't have kids, I could have done more. Just the vibe. She never said it, but it's the vibe, the body language,
It's
the
funny, they raise us to be independent, achieving women, and
yes.
then yeah, and then they want to have their grandbabies and that kind of stuff, and they
Yes.
don't know how to reconcile that. But the other thing I wanna add on here too is, hats off to the military moms. Like, I'm fortunate enough that, again, we've got a ton in this area, and to constantly have to pick up house, recreate a home quickly, and a
Oh,
place
yes.
of, y'all are badass at that, by the way, like
Thank you.
and
Thank
to
you.
create a home and safety for your family. Meanwhile, your husband's God knows where. You're trying to find medical providers and this and that, and you're all amazing networkers, by the way, too. And
I have realized that
that
was
is a
literally what I
skill
needed to
set.
do.
That
Yeah,
is
to
a
thrive.
skill set. And okay, and after this too, I have friends that their husbands are retiring, and now the husband's coming home, and mom's run the show for this many years, and now dad's trying to run the show, and it's a little bit different.
Yes. That's actually
Handling that transition, like, I have a few
yeah.
friends going through that right now, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Y'all are badass." I'm just gonna put that one out there.
Thank you. Actually, I do want to touch on something, and this is something I'm actually working on, not just for clients who come to me for postpartum planning
Mhm.
or postpartum coaching, because I want to incorporate like fourth trimester and for the
Yeah.
postpartum year, really.
Yep.
Um, so from because I volunteer a lot with the soldier and family readiness group with my husband's
Mm.
army. So
Yep.
part of his unit, I have like amazing friends who invited me into what they were doing, and they made it so like they made advocacy work fun. It was like
Mm.
learning all these things and learning how to, I guess, own our spots. Because
Yes.
there is still a bias, like, oh, you're a military spouse, you're just a housewife. You know the just thing.
No,
Yeah.
I've
So
been you're amazing PTA moms too. I'm like, "You guys got all this stuff down. You know how to do the communication. I bow
it's
down to you. I will Venmo you anytime, whatever you need."
so it's been a very interesting journey because the more I learn, and one thing I've been exposed to is a lot of garrisons have what they call the Command Readiness and Resiliency Council. So they
Yes.
invite high leadership, so like battalion, brigade. So you got your company level, then your I think battalion and brigade, and so on and so forth. So it's battalion and brigade level commanders who go to these meetings and they talk about their soldiers.
Yes.
And these councils, they go by the 5 pillars of soldier readiness and resiliency, which the idea is that if one soldier has their 5 pillars fulfilled, then they are mission and combat ready for whatever.
Right.
One of the pillars is family. Guess
Yes.
who falls under family?
You. It is you. It is all you, and it always has been, and that's the part that I think, again, if you've not and those of you that are listening, we have a lot of SLAM moms that listen. There are a lot of military moms that listen. You know what I'm talking about, but if you don't,
Yes.
military moms are amazing, and I think it's such a gift to be able to support them because they support so much their spouse or their family or that sort of thing there. So
Yeah, I really
glad
want
that
to
that's
Yeah, I really want to say that, to all of you guys listening, definitely, because this family pillar, and that's something the whole army wide, they're moving towards making things more, bringing back the family
yes,
orientation,
yep,
and that family pillar is you, because just like Carrie said, you're there, you're holding the fort, you're raising the next generation, so that
yes,
your soldier can go do their thing for the
yes,
country.
yeah,
And if that family pillar, i.e., you, the spouse and the mom, is not
yep,
supported, they are not ready out there.
yeah,
And
and
honestly, and this
also
is from my personal experience. So the Ukraine Russia thing, and I can
yeah,
talk about it now because it's public news as last
yeah,
year. My husband got deployed. A bunch of people from here got deployed because Germany, it's
right, you're
so
close,
close.
yeah,
And there was a huge, huge thing that it was quite messy, but as soon as we figured out that supporting the spouse and the
yep.
military moms, that helped the soldiers' mental health out there
Yeah, and
directly.
not to leave out our moms that are service members themselves. That's a whole 'nother thing that
Absolutely.
are having
That's a
to
that's a
return.
whole other
That could be a
level.
whole separate podcast, and again,
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough to work with a bunch where you're not only expected to handle this part, but you're supposed to meet your return to fitness requirements and
Yes.
serve and be deployed and all this other stuff too. Like that could be a whole nother conversation, but it's a
Absolutely.
lot. It's a lot. But no, thank you guys for your service for
Thank you.
sure. At the end, I always kind of ask a few questions of our
Mhm.
guests. This one, your favorite activity since becoming a mom? And it doesn't have to involve your
Oh,
kids.
yeah, favorite activity. Volunteering. I never thought I would enjoy volunteering so much. So I volunteer with the USO on base as well.
Ah,
Yeah,
fantastic.
I pitched to them like, "Hey, can I do a birth story support group once a month?" And they're like, "Sure." So
That's
I have
great.
that.
I
And
love
then the
that.
yeah, Army Community Service here, they run the Army Family Action Plan program or Army Family Team Building. And again, with my girlfriends here who started, I kind of just ended up there. And now that two of them have moved away, one is retiring, I'm kind of, still here, but I continue doing that because I had
That's
fun. And
great.
the people here in this garrison they're amazing in supporting the volunteers. Even I would say the garrison commander himself, he invited a bunch of us to attend the garrison strategic conference thing, which I was like,
He's a smart
wow,
guy.
he
He's a smart
is.
guy to invite you.
Yeah, and they're trying to revamp the spouse sponsorship program here. So I
Mm,
think also just being in this environment to
yep,
support volunteers, yeah,
that's
I
fantastic.
highly recommend it now. As if you're not able to go back to work, especially if the military life, there's also a lot of push towards converting volunteer experience into a professional
Yeah,
experience and using
yep,
that in your resume, because that's really the only way we can do it
right.
if you can't
Especially depending
work.
on what country you're in. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
All right, one piece of advice for new moms.
This big thing. So I want to tie this in with my freebie, because there are at least two big things in my freebie I talk about that I think new moms, we need to advocate for our health whenever we see fit. So first, Carrie, it's down your alley. It's the pelvic floor stuff.
Yeah,
And if my own physical therapist didn't remind me, she said, your urinary leakage and all those problems, she's like, they're common, but they're not normal.
yep,
Not normal. If anyone
yep,
tells you that, I don't care what professor, doctor they are, leave that office, go get a second
yep,
opinion, or just go see you directly, because
yep.
you can diagnose, you can, and even for me, she had to tell me, Kegels are not going to work for you, Kristal, because you
Mm,
carry your stress in your pelvic floor. You need to relax it. And I
yes.
was like, oh, wow. Okay. Because I've been
I'm
doing Kegels before I see you.
so happy to hear you say that because I on Instagram I will get daily DMs from all over the world, and depending on where people are, like I have a client right now that she's in a different country, and she's an expat, and her PT is telling her one thing, and I'm like, that's not what's happening, but that's what we have on the ground.
Oh, goodness.
So
Yeah,
we're having to navigate what information is standard of care in different countries. It's tricky.
it is. And the last thing is, if you encounter tiredness despite you having your naps, or your kids are not going through growth spurts and you still have daytime sleepiness, and ask your partner or anyone around you if you snore.
Oh
Postpartum
yeah.
postpartum snoring and the
Yep.
sleep disordered breathing is so severely, I mean, not just
Oxygen is important.
underdiagnosed. Yeah, not just underdiagnosed, but nobody even asks you. And so I recently got diagnosed with sleep apnea, and because
Mm,
I have the medical background and I know, so I thought,
right.
it's time to go see a doctor. I'm a
Right?
bad I'm a bad patient. I admit that.
We all are. It's all good.
And I started snoring with my first pregnancy, and I just never bothered. I Nobody asked me,
Oh,
and I thought, it'll go away, and it never did, up until like now my second kid, yeah, almost 2 years old.
yep.
And finally saw the doctor, did the sleep study, and
Yep.
gosh, it looked horrible. No wonder I'm so tired. So it's not
Oxygen
just,
is a game changer. Yes.
yeah, so moms, you're not just tired because
Yep.
we already do so much. You
Yep.
already stretch thin. And, when the kids go through all their behavioral and sleep changes, usually moms stay up to do that. But bear in mind, you're sleeping, your oxygen could also be another factor. So don't doubt
Don't
your body.
don't
If
doubt your
some,
body. I
yeah,
like that.
just go find someone, and find someone who believes you. And unfortunately, that's the work we have to do today until that
That's great.
changes.
No,
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. All right. Anyone in kind of this space that we're in that we should know about or we should follow or pay attention to?
Ooh, there is someone I really like on Instagram. I think they're called My Connected Motherhood.
Ooh,
They
okay.
They do a lot of sleep stuff, but
Mm.
they challenge the notion of sleep training. I love it because I tried sleep training with my first. It was miserable all around, both for me and my child and
Mhm.
my husband.
I'm with you. Yes.
Yeah, and I love how they really reframe how we see infant sleep, like all the kids, all that babies need, and them waking up often. That's literally their survival mechanism.
Right.
That's normal. And this is where I think pediatricians and family doctors, if and again time, because I know from experience that the system doesn't give us that time to connect with our
Yeah.
patients as much. But if somehow they can include more education on what's normal to expect from your baby, then
Mm.
I think managing that expectation on sleep is going to help a lot.
Yes, and that would probably also help with mental health for moms. My oldest
Yes.
barely slept until he was 5, but, we
I'm
had
still
another
barely
one.
sleeping, but I'm
I
still barely
usually don't
sleeping,
tell
but
that to
yeah.
people unless, like, they ask because no one wants to hear that.
That's true.
Alright, and then finally, what does it mean to you to be an active mom in postpartum?
Um, it's just getting to know myself again. Getting
Mm,
That's been huge for me. Getting to know myself again, finding that spark that I thought I had to just snuff out because I became a mom.
yeah.
And I will say this on air because I'm not shy anymore, but I dabbled in pole dancing in med school. If anyone asked me what I
Love
learned in
it!
med school, I learned to pole
Love
dance, I
it.
learned aerials. And I think, I want to go back into that sometime
Good
once,
for
my
you.
husband, like, life settles, because
Yeah.
the places we moved to so far, I haven't really been able to access such studios or dance studios
Yep.
and fitness studios. So when we move next, I think I want to go back to that just to
I
see how
love
I
it.
feel again doing that.
Alright, well, then after you do that, then we'll have you back on the show. How about that? You can tell me all about pole dancing.
I would love to. I would love to.
If you'd like to know more about Dr. Kristal's information and her courses and her book, you can find her at www.mamaswingwoman.com. Love that URL, by the way. That's
Thank you.
awesome. Dr. Kristal Lau, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We appreciate it.
Thank you.